BT Sport Pods.
We realised that something new was happening.
Cantona gave United that extra belief.
So Alex Ferguson knew the Premier League would come.
Welcome to the Premier League Storybook with me, Jake Humphrey. I'll be taking you through the stories that matter throughout the league's glorious 30 years and hearing the behind-the-scenes stories from those who were there. We've got such a great series lined up, from great title races to players we all loved down the years, right up to Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp's annual battle. But where better to start than chapter 1 of our storybook, the team of the 90s. The Premier League had its debut season in 1992, a hugely exciting time for fans of the game, with the new league full of glitz, glamour and newly awash with TV money. There was a hole at the top of English football, however. Liverpool's dominance of the 1980s had started to dim in the new decade. Fellow Northwest giants Manchester United had gone without a league title since 1967, with their manager, Alex Ferguson, no sir in those days, leading his team to second behind Leeds United in the final season of the Football League Division 1. Their hugely talented team were out for blood and, after a battle with Aston Villa and Norwich City among others, cantered to the first ever Premier League title by 10 points. I sat down with their now legendary goalkeeper Peter Schmeichel to discuss the importance of that first title win and how it set Manchester United up to become the team of the 90s. First, however, there was a lot of talk around the league about the new branding and the new attention the game was getting. Les Ferdinand was one of the game's best strikers, banging the goals in at QPR, who finished the league's inaugural season in a credible 5th as London's top team. Here's what he thought of the new league.
QPR played in the first Monday night football game against Man City, and the razzmatazz with the pyrotechnics and the dancing girls. We realised that something new was happening. And I suppose most of us wondered, was this just a fad? Do you know what I mean? Was this just going to be for a month or so? Everyone, the glitz and the thing in the Premier League, and then it was going to fall away. But as we've seen, it hasn't fallen away. It's just continued to go from strength to strength.
Another striker who made headlines that first season was Chris Sutton, the star man for Norwich City, who led the Premier League for much of the year before United overtook them at the final furlong. United were massively boosted in November by the signing of Eric Cantona, who arrived in a shock £1 million deal from the previous year's champions Leeds. Cantona quickly became the team's talisman and, as we'll find out, was crucial on and off the pitch to United becoming the team of the 90s. Sutton, certainly, was left in no doubt.
I think Sir Alex Ferguson was starting to assemble a really formidable team, that had presence with the likes of Schmeichel, Bruce, Pallister. Maybe Cantona was the difference, the maverick, the player who gave them that particular edge and got them over the line. I think they won the league pretty comfortably in the end, but it was maybe that experience and that class, which, clearly Norwich City, we had our own talented players, but Cantona gave, I think, United that extra belief and that extra quality in the final third, which was, possibly the difference.
While fans knew Cantona from his title-winning heroics at Leeds, it was unprecedented to see just how much he spearheaded United to dominating the decade. One manager who was surprised was Glenn Hoddle, who played in Cantona's native France at the same time as United's future legend.
When I was in France, he struggled. I can only say the truth. He went from Auxerre on loan to Marseille on loan to Bordeaux. He went to 5 clubs on loan. So can you imagine that? You're thinking the Cantona that we know in this country, you'd have thought, I've never heard of, It didn't really happen for him at the international scene. He had talent, but he didn't have the mentality in France. He couldn't deal with, or he didn't want to deal with man-for-man marking. And, that's what's needed when you're playing abroad. In Italy, it was the same. You would sometimes, the number 10 would be picked out, stop him playing, you stop the team. And unfortunately, Eric sort of lost his head, got sent off quite a few times. Now, when he come to England, we don't man-for-man mark in this country. We let him go in between the spaces, and suddenly he started, when he went to Leeds, he started to drift into these holes, get turned on the ball, and then his talents now are going to kill you. And he had that Bergkamp sort of role, he had that Zola role, Teddy Sheringham role coming off the striker. So at the end of the day, no one went with him, and I bet he thought to himself, "Oh, I quite like this." So once he got time and space, he then became the player that he did at Leeds and at Manchester United.
So how did this come about? How did Ferguson change United from also-rans to title winners? And just how crucial was Eric Cantona? Few people on earth are better placed to answer that than Peter Schmeichel. So I sat down on a video call with one of the best goalkeepers of all time. So Peter, what I'd love you to do is kind of just rewind a little bit to the very start, really. So you'd only arrived in England a year before the start of the Premier League. What did you make of this new exciting thing, the Premier League? What was the talk among the players at the time?
If I'm honest, I don't remember us being, fussed about it at all. We've just come off a really, really bad ending to the previous season, feeling that, we gave the championship away, felt that we should have won it, but messed up in the last sort of 2.5 weeks. I left for my summer holidays, thinking I was going on holiday, ending up playing the European Championships, which we won. And I came back on a high, thinking about that and looking forward to this season number 2 for me. Having heard about the second season syndrome and all of these kind of things, focusing on making sure that I could perform to the same level. And I think most of the players just never really paid much attention to a new format, new tournament.
And how important was that summer for you to go off and be successful with Denmark after the disappointment of the previous top flight campaign, the first division campaign?
I'm not so sure that it had an impact on me that I was going to do better or try more. I always felt I had a little when I in between Brøndby and Man United, which was a short period of time, only about 3 weeks. I had a little sort of I had a little think about, is this too big a step up? And then, of course, I felt really comfortable in my first season. And one of the things that you learn very, very quickly when you work with someone like Alex Ferguson is that you don't hang in the past. You always look ahead. You always think about the next job. And this, in many ways, enables you to not think about your own performances, because the performances are in the past. You have to think about your next performance. You have to do well for the team, for the fans, for the club, for the manager. That's how you think. You've got to win this next game. And that was a theme every day. You've got to win. So I didn't really feel that, having gone through that summer and having had that incredible experience, that did anything else to me other than maybe, more sort of nail a position of who I was. I think a lot of the reputation and legacy, if you like, was built on that summer. But I didn't think about it at the time. I was so happy to be at Manchester United. I have no words to describe how happy I was. I've been dreaming about that all of my life, and just to be there was that was just incredible for me. So it was all about thinking about making sure that I could play to the same level every game. And I didn't think too much about what was going on around me, the Premier League. Footballers are very difficult to move in their beliefs, and something new is introduced, footballers will always say the negative thing first. One of the things I remember so clearly was the first time we lined up to the Champions League hymn. We're all kind of looking around thinking, this is not an international. What is going on here? And now every player in the world wants to have that experience where they line up and hear that music, because that means you're playing the Champions League. But we didn't think it was very cool at the time. And that's how footballers are. And that's why I don't think too many people kind of noticed or thought about this is different. And it was only really when the season was over and we didn't get a medal for winning it. We got a small replica of the trophy. And you're looking at this and you're thinking, whoa, this is special, because when you win something, the thing you get is a medal. But that's what you get. And now you had this little trophy. Yes, this is different, And then it just took off. And, we were, in the first round, we were fighting with Norwich and Aston Villa. And then Blackburn came on the scene, started to spend money. And that, I think, was the first really sort of big indication of what this was. This was becoming a money game. There's a lot more money in it, and there was a lot more money being spent.
And what did Sir Alex say to you when he first had that conversation with you about Manchester United? Because obviously you're like, you'd arrived there and they hadn't won the title since 67, since the late 60s. Like, was it a conversation about we will win the Premier League eventually, or we'll win the title eventually when you signed for United?
It was a really, really weird transition for me because I really should have arrived the year before than I did. My club, Brøndby, was stubborn and ducking their heels in and were asking for far too much money, which today sounds ridiculous. They're asking for £1.2 million, which is just crazy to think. So, and it didn't happen, and I was devastated. And one day after training, I was called to my agent's house, and Sir Alex was there. Well, he wasn't Sir Alex at the time, but he was there. So he took the morning flight to Copenhagen, and he told me that he was as disappointed as I was, but he was waiting for me. He was coming back in the summer. So he was giving me a few tasks, improve, develop, come back even, or come over even stronger, because we are right at the point now where we're able to win. And not putting it in those words, but my understanding from that meeting was that I would be the final piece in the jigsaw for what he'd been building on for 5 years. So, of course, it was a personal disappointment to me that I wasn't the final piece in that jigsaw, because we didn't win the first year, but then, of course, we won in the second year. And it turned out that Eric was the final piece. And it was, again, Sir Alex's brilliance in understanding that this guy, he had to come to Manchester United, and also managing him. And Eric was just incredible to play with. So it was never like in his meetings that he would say, oh, we are good enough to win the league. It was kind of unspoken all the time. And the requirement was always to focus, for us players, focus on the next job, making sure that we would win that next game. And then I think him and the coaching staff, and they would kind of look at the bigger picture. It was never really put on our shoulders.
Let's delve a bit deeper then into the Eric Cantona element of your time at Manchester United. Do you remember when you first heard that United might be after him? Like, did you hear before the fans, before it got announced? Was there a conversation had?
It all happened very quickly. So first of all, this guy Eric was, don't forget, in the first Premier League, there was only 13 non-UK Ireland players in the Premier League. So any foreign player would be special in a way, either skill-wise or as a personality, or to attract the manager's attention. So Eric had come to Leeds after I think he had a trial at Sheffield Wednesday, and it was Trevor Francis didn't really fancy him. Howard Kendall then did at Leeds. But then Eric, I know Eric really, really well. Everybody, of course, who played with him know him well. Eric is not difficult. I mean, whoever would try to convince me that Eric is difficult, they will just be lying. Eric is just different, and different is good. Very, very good. Thinking in different ways is also a way, an avenue to create chances and scoring goals. And I think what he did on the pitch just proves and underpinned that. But Eric was different. He was a shy guy. He came from a different background than most of us. He is very interested in theatre and stuff that you don't normally, connect to footballers. So I think a lot of people at the time would have had a difficult time working with him, because it was hard to get, something out of him. And, the time was very, very different. I won't say that the Leeds players couldn't work with him, but of course it could. But all kinds of things, were rumored about him because he was different. And I think when you have a system which is, been going on for 50 years, that this is how we do it, this is how certain players play, those positions are supposed to do this, and a right fullback runs up and down and crosses the ball, and then, stuff like that, very stereotype way of thinking football, which is completely changed now. And then you got someone like Eric in. Yeah, I can see for players and managers who are not ready to deal with that, would have been a challenge. But Fergie, he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And we didn't know anything about it. It all came, as my understanding is, that, Howard Kenton phones Sir Alex up asking to get Dennis Irvin back. And he says, no, but can I have Eric? And he says, yes. And the next day, Eric is at Old Trafford. That's how quick it went. I mean, we didn't have transfer windows back then, by the way. That's important to understand in this story. And there he was, Eric. And straight away, first day, changed everything. He was so shy, couldn't sit in the dressing room. Everyone was looking at him, and he, grabbed the ball, went onto the pitch. There was a wall behind the goal, and he just started to sort of do half volleys up on the wall and chesting it down, working on his technique. And everyone was watching, because the old training ground you could watch from the canteen or the fitness room. Everyone was hanging around the windows looking at Eric and, what's this guy doing? No one ever goes out before. No one ever does anything on their own. And here he is, this man, we know him as a strange man doing this. And, before you knew it, everybody was out before doing little skill tests. Before you knew that, you knew it. Everyone was doing personal work after training as well. And that all came from Eric. And then, of course, he's the nicest guy in the world. He played, in many ways, he played a part that, what you see on the pitch is also an act, and that's a brilliant act. And you can only do that if you're brilliant as a footballer and you deliver. And it's difficult for me, top of my head, to think of any players that I've ever played with who delivered as he did. And he was just incredible. And I think in many ways, we got, a lot of big players played in the Premier League. But I believe, and I truly believe this, I believe there's been no one bigger than him. I don't think so.
Because we all know what you don't, we don't know what you know. We know him as a player. You know him for what he did away from just on the football field. And I think we all go, Eric Cantona was the catalyst for his performances on the pitch. But it almost sounds like, from your perspective, he changed the mentality of Manchester United, which is just as important.
But that's what you need. So it wasn't like he came in and did something and then everyone had to follow his lead. This all goes back to the manager. So this is all about managing people and letting people express themselves. This is one of Fergie's favorite sayings, always saying that before games, go and express yourself. So letting people express themselves, let them be themselves on the pitch. Never tell anyone, when you have the ball here, you have to do this. Never do that, but work daily training, work on what you want to do, work in patterns, in shapes, in different things, and then let people express themselves. And of course, you can only do that if you have the luxury of signing the players that you want for your team. And then, of course, you had, at the time, you had me from Denmark, you had Andre from Russia, you had Eric from France. You had foreign players who came in and were different. We were all different because, we grew up in different environments, different cultures. But managing that and never, ever taking that difference out of us, and especially Eric, I think that's a masterpiece, absolute masterpiece. And then allowing Eric to be Eric inspired other players to become better players by being themselves and not putting on an act. So when he went on that pitch the first day and started to do that little bit on his own, it came out of, I think, more than anything, of shyness. It's difficult to come into a new workplace. I think we've all experienced getting into a new group of people. You don't know anybody. But what that led to was an addition to the culture that was already there, where you also take a little bit of responsibility of your own performances and your own. So you enhance what you need to be, what your good points, and you work on things you need to be better at. So what you saw in the next coming years were, and it was quite natural for players to do that. Gary Neville working on crosses on the run, running and throwing. Beckham always every day, every single day after training, practicing corner kicks, practicing free kicks. So you had players doing all these little individual things that was not part of the, if you like, the communal training. And I think that came from Eric doing that the first day, but the manager allowing it to happen and then managing this situation, because you got young kids who came up in 95. You got all of them at once. All they want to do all day is play football. And if you play in the Premier League, you cannot do that. You have to preserve some energy, and you have to, you got to rest. There's a lot of things you want to do. So managing all that was brilliant. And that's, I think for me, that is the one thing that really, really separates Alex from everybody else, that he could deal with these players and these different personalities.
And creating that winning culture. I remember, this is what's really fascinating for me, is the mindset and the culture at the elite level. And I remember saying to Rio Ferdinand when I first worked with him, I said, what did Sir Alex used to say to new signings to let them know what was expected of them at the football club? And he would say, he'd look at me sort of puzzled and say, he didn't need to say anything, because he set such a tone that we said the words for him. If someone came in, he said he remembers a player once celebrating a win, and they pushed him up against the wall and said, like, you're at Man United now. You can celebrate trophies and you can celebrate titles. We don't celebrate wins at this football club. Does that ring a bell?
No, don't. No, but not so. You don't celebrate win. You don't celebrate being number 4 because you're in the Champions League. That's not what the football club is all about. Of course, you celebrate wins. I mean, of course, you've done your job. You get 3 points and it's brilliant. But it's not like the champagne is being brought out. it's well done, and you move on to the next thing. So when you work with Fergie, there are certain segments of days. So you have training days, you have match days. And what would happen after a match every time was he would say his piece, whatever it was, and he would finish. When he was finished, the last thing he'd say, get your bath, see you Monday or whatever. Always get your bath, see you next time. And with him, because he was always looking so far ahead, always thinking about how to develop, how to make people better, how to add to the squad, how the young kids were doing, what am I going to say, what buttons am I going to push, and all of these things, always thinking about that, never wanting to stand still, never want to stagnate in any way. We could lose a game and he would be the mildest person in the world. He would not, even though if, let's just say that I made a mistake that cost the goal that lost, he wouldn't say anything to me. He would just, cheer up, it happens, blah, blah, blah. Then you could win 5-0 and he'd go absolutely ballistic, just go ballistic, because that was a point where a message that he needed to bring to the team or to the squad had to be said. So he was always finding the right time to bring those messages into the playing community, if you like. And that's just him. I mean, I remember one incident. I'd already retired, and they played. I think they played Sunday, and we're playing Wednesday again. They played Everton at home, and I think it was a draw. And it was in a difficult time. It wasn't really getting many wins under their belt at the time. And I went to Carrington, and they were training, and I went watching train, and he's like, "Hey, come," and he's chatting away, and he's happy, and he's joking with the players, and totally vintage Ferguson. I mean, the way I knew him, building people up straight away. Then he said, "Walk with me." That's what he did every day anyway. Always walked over and watched the other teams, the younger teams, for a couple of minutes, maybe half an hour sometimes. But always touch base with every group. But I walked over, and it annoys me so much that I can't remember who it was. But he pointed to a player when we got over to one of the younger teams, and he said, "See this guy? In 18 months' time, when we play the first Carling Cup, whatever it was at the time, Carling Cup match, he would play 45 minutes. 18 months before, he's already thinking about that." And that's what separates not only him, but also that generation of managers. They were interested in that. Today, the lifespan is like 2.5 years, if it even that, They don't care about the academy. Because why would they spend so much energy and time on developing something that they're not gonna work with these guys anyway? So they just want to buy. It's better, for them, because they can adjust a team like that. But with him, it was always like he knew every single player. He knew all their families. He knew everything about them and how they play, the strength, the weakness, everything. And it's a bit scary talking about that, because you would have known everything about yourself, But this is it. I mean, people talk about, so what was the dressing room? I mean, how was it with Peter? Explain to me the culture of Man United. I can't. It's just something that was there, just something that was there. And then on your question there, what did he say to new players? But he didn't have to say anything to new players, because he's scouting. And the recruitment was so precise. So he would be looking at it. He would never sign a player if he needed a player now. He would never sign anybody because he needed someone, never. He would scout them for a long time. He would find out everything about them. One of the big things for him was their personality. He wasn't expecting everybody to be friends. He didn't care about that. But the personality, Man United, pressure everywhere you go in the world. People will be looking at what you do, so they will be looking at you, and they will put so much pressure on you. So scouting and recruiting, he had to get it right. So, he was collecting as much data as he could, and therefore he knew that the player coming in would have the mentality to deal with first of all being a Man United player, but also having that winning mentality.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's talk then about some of the specifics from that season. I think people, I don't forget because I'm a Norwich City fan, obviously, but I think generally people forget how close it was for most of that season, with Norwich and Aston Villa up there with you. Did you always feel that you were going to be the team that won the league? And if not, was there a moment where you thought, maybe this is going to happen? I remember Norwich getting beaten at Carrow Road. I was in the stands watching that game towards the end of the season, and that was the moment when we thought it's not going to happen. Was there a moment where you thought we're going to win this thing?
If I am honest, right from the first game, we lost to Sheffield United, and then we lost the next one, and we drew the third one. Even then, I thought we were going to win.
Really? Why?
So I've had 1 year under my belt. I knew the competition. I knew what we did not to win it, you know. And I'm not blaming anyone, but we had a few replays, and we had a couple of games postponed, and they all ended up in the same week. So we played 4 games from Saturday to the next Monday, and our pitch was so bad. And 2 of them were on our own pitch against team fighting for relegation. And it just didn't happen for us. But I knew the players. I couldn't see anyone out there being better than our team. And having had this experience, everyone then had it. So you had Ryan. Ryan understood it now. So Ryan was only 17. You had Andre coming in, understanding that last bit of the season. You had myself, new player coming in, understanding the league. And then, of course, we got Eric in November. Was it November? I think it was November. We got Eric in, and straight away he was ahead. And this was the one thing that we missed. So for people who can't remember what football was like back then, everyone basically played in the same way. We played 4-4-2. Everyone had gone through the academy systems in England. So not too many foreign players, as I said, 13 before. So everyone had been trained in the same way. So you always use that example that a right fullback would work in a very set pattern, up and down, defending like this, overlapping, getting across. This is what the game was. And we had Ryan and Lee Sharp on the left, and we had Andrew Conchelskis on the right, which was like the 3 of them. I mean, they were so quick and they were so good, and their crosses were so good. So at the end of the day, the way we played, we had to be better individually on those positions than our opposition. And I thought we were, but we were also vulnerable, because when everyone plays in the same way, it's not easy, but it's easier to sort of defend against it because they're used to it. So, we had with Andre and Ryan, we had a little bit of surprise in there because they were a little bit different, but still same-ish. So when we got Eric, then all of a sudden, we've got through the middle as well. Now, that wasn't a way that the teams were playing. No, not many teams in England were playing through the middle. So our variety was a lot. So we were very, very quick. And we're playing the wide game with crosses. We had Mark Hughes at the end of crosses. I mean, he was terrific. We got Paul Ince was brilliant getting into the box. So we had a lot of weapons dealing with that kind of game. But not a lot of, and then the second thing was, of course, we played long ball up to Mark Hughes, and he would hold it up, get midfield players coming up, taking over, so would win 60 yards in one kind of move. But all of a sudden, we had playing little 1-2s through the middle. Now, this is where we differed from everybody else, because not a lot of teams had that, if any. That came sort of 3-4 years later. Then other teams began to play like that. But we had this, and that came from Eric. So all of a sudden, we had that. And that made us, first of all, the confidence of having different ways of playing. So if you had to push a game, you didn't have to sort of bombard the box, and fight for high balls, which was the norm at the time. And anything can happen and nothing can happen. Now you had, little geniuses who could play, in and around centre half, and a game that they're not used to. And when you are in a team like that who has this many buttons to push, then you're better than everybody else. So it's down to, of course, ourselves to win the games that we needed to win. I think once we turned the year, I think that's when everything started to take shape. And also, we were so strong. United had always been stronger in the last part of the season. That was something the manager kept reminding us, that we would be stronger and stronger, and everybody would be more and more tired. So the combination of all that, the confidence from that, it might sound a little bit arrogant, but I never doubted. I thought we were that good, and I thought, we were definitely more than good enough to win. And at the end, we won it by 10 points. So that was different. I mean, it was still very competitive. It was a great team that you guys had. It was a great team, and obviously, it's a bit of a different world at the moment for Norwich, but I always, when I watch Norwich, I always remember those games at Carrow Road. We always had really, really good games. And it's funny because I went to Ed Sheeran, and he was in Copenhagen the other day. And he's an Ipswich fan. And for me, obviously, Ipswich Norwich, it's the same area, if you like. It's a long, long drive. But it's two different worlds. I have two different kinds of memories from playing those teams. I never felt great at Portman Road, but it was always brilliant to play at Carrow.
Well, I wish we'd made it harder for you, but sadly we didn't.
I don't know. I think you nearly took it to the wire. Aston Villa as well.
Yeah.
It was. I think you fell back the week before Aston Villa, or was it the week before again? It was coming when it was coming to a close. This is where we went wrong. This is where we had the massive advantage to you guys in Aston Villa, was that we were in a situation similar to what we were in the year before, and we messed it up. And by messing up, you get so much more experience. And having been in that situation, knowing, and if you look at the next couple of Premier Leagues, how close it was in the running, and how many times the teams that we were fighting with, we was shifting positions, in that, and how many bad results, bad sort of draw, will for many, many teams in that running be a panic situation. But because we had the experience that you can, a draw is still a point. That point can be the difference between winning and not winning. I remember, especially my last year at United, we lost a game just before Christmas, 23rd of December to Middlesbrough. And then in the dressing room afterwards, we agreed that we wouldn't lose a game again. And we didn't. And we won the Premier League by 1 point to Arsenal. But we played a game in Charlton in end of January. I think it was ended away. It was a miserable night, Wednesday night, I think. And we won it 1-0, but we scored in the 90th minute. And it was such a lucky goal. It was a cross from Scholes that Yorkie headed in via the post. And yes, it's a win. It's a great thing. A point would have been great at the time. We thought, but when you do the tally at the end of the season, we wouldn't have won the Premier League. So you have to understand along the lines that there are certain things that you have to do. And when you have all that experience from having done it before and having messed it up a couple of times as well, then you have such a great advantage to your competitors.
Yeah, you see that, I find that interesting, because one of my questions was going to be, how did you have such belief in the team, and how did you do this when the manager had never won a title, none of you had ever won the league in England, yet you managed to see it through? So it's interesting that it was not doing it the season before that gave you the mental strength you needed to complete the job. I think sometimes we feel you have to have won it to win it again, but sometimes it is those failures that make us stronger, isn't it?
I think that played a really big part. Experience plays a part in everything that you do and everything that you achieve, and especially in football. But yeah, of course, you got to get over the line one time before you get that experience of winning it. I think it's wrong to say that Fergie hadn't won, because I think what he did at Aberdeen was on par, nearly on par with Leicester winning the Premier League. I mean, what he did to that football club up there, which of course got the attention of Martin Edwards at Man United. What he did there was incredible. So he had experience of winning, and winning is winning. So it doesn't matter where you are, what level you are at. Winning is winning. It does something to you. There's a big difference of being a really, really good player and then being a winning player. Not necessarily the good player could be better than the winning player, but the winning player knows what to do literally at everything that happens. So even if you get to the last part of the season and you have a bad result, if you can keep a cool head and just, erase that from your memory, use whatever experience you have to go on to the next job, stand a chance. There's no doubt about that. And of course, so Alex had a plan. Right from the moment he came to Man United, he had a plan. Certain things that he wanted to eradicate from the club. He was going to change the culture of how players behaved. He was going to, one thing which is a great example of how tough that job was. When we talk about the first Premier League, the player of the year was Paul McGrath from Aston Villa. He got player of the year. He was a Man United player when Fergie arrived at the club, but there were certain things about Paul and his lifestyle that was unacceptable to Alex's project and not comparable and compatible to his project. So, and there you have the player of the year in England, in the Premier League, the first ever Premier League, wasn't a Man United player, but he was Man United player before. So this project, which has been going on for quite a while, since November 86, and we win this in 93. So along the way, he wins an FA Cup and he wins the Cup Winners' Cup. He wins a League Cup as well. So it was a progression into, I think I've been thinking a lot about this. I think that Sir Alex Ferguson knew the Premier League would come, and he knew what the Premier League was before anybody else even thought about that. He was sensing a change, and he was sensing a change that was what it became, and where he was very, very proactive in bringing the football club in a position to take charge, if you like, where everybody else became reactive and was kind of left behind. And that, I think, did put Man United in the driving seat. Of course, it could be a coincidence. It could have been. But, I mean, I know Sir Alex so well. This guy is unbelievable. The way he thinks. He could even have manipulated the system into creating the Premiership or giving people ideas. I mean, I don't know. But anyway, we were ready. A lot of clubs weren't. And the clubs that were ready, Norwich were ready, Aston Villa were ready. But that's a big difference between those clubs and Manchester United. Big difference between those clubs and the likes of Liverpool and Arsenal, and which are, on the world stage, much bigger clubs. And the world stage is important when we talk about the history of the Premier League, because the popularity of the Premier League has, played a very, very big part in creating what the Premier League is today.
And listen, ever modest, you've spoken a lot about other players, you've spoken a lot about the manager. You haven't given yourself an awful lot of credit. But if you rewind to that first Premier League win for United, your form after Christmas, your form in that final run of games, other people have praised you. Do you think it's some of the very best football you played in your career?
If I'm honest, I can't remember. I can't. Do you know what? So I was brought up, in my professional career, I was brought up with, it had to be the team. So when I was at Brøndby, we just started out with full-time professional football. My first game for Brøndby was a quarterfinal in what we call the Champions League today. That was my first game. I mean, we were this little football club, a year and a half into a full-time professional project, playing in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. We lost 1-0 in the first game and drew 1-1 in the second. So we played at the level, and Porto that we lost to, they ended up winning it. So the only way that we could do that was by being a team. So I got brought up by, this is a team. It doesn't matter who takes center stage or who's the hero or if someone is the villain. It doesn't matter. We're all responsible. We're all sticking together. And if we don't, we will not win anything. So that's a mentality that I brought into, and yes, I was playing a part in my being on the pitch, or the way I was very, for me, it was something I had to be like that in order to stay focused. And I can, as a middle-aged man, I can look back and think, whoa, crazy guy, what's going on there, But for me, I never thought about I never wanted to be in the newspapers. I just wanted to do my bit for the club. And I said this right at the beginning. Just being at Man United was, it was my dream. So I was living my dream, and that's all I could think about. And I'm looking around the dressing room, I'm looking around, we're playing games, I'm thinking, would I like to play in any other team in the world? No, these guys are incredible. And, if you play that many games, there will be games where you have to step up, where you have to be the so-called hero. And then there are other games where you don't do much, and then you have the other end of the pitch scoring goals, and they are the heroes. At the end of the day, they won 3 points and I won 3 points. And that is the most important thing. So I'm not even being modest. I just don't remember. If I'm honest, I don't remember. And it's not something, even today, it's not something which is important to me. What really is important is with the teams I played in, that we always achieved something. We always achieved something which was positive. And we did that by being teams. And that's what football for me is.
Yeah. I think one thing that we can both agree on, though, is that when a team gets that first title win, as you all did, it makes a big difference. To win the Premier League for the first time gives you the belief that you can go on. And I remember, speaking with Paul Scholes, who said that he didn't really lift his head up properly at Carrington until they'd won the Champions League, because then you could finally stand alongside the Bobby Charltons of this world and be an equal to them. So there was a huge moment for the football club. And then it led on to, Roy Keane arriving, and then domination and, years and years of United success. Do you look back and just fully appreciate how that first title win in that inaugural season in the Premier League really did transform the the fortunes of that football club.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that season, there was a lot of physical changes as well. So the Stretford end had been taken down, and the new Stretford end was being built as we played that season. So for many games, we played, our home stand was a building site. So that's a physical change. And when you actually thinking back, there was quite a lot of stadiums at the time being rebuilt. I remember that famous stand at Arsenal, where it actually looked like there were people in the stand. Remember that big sort of the wall they built? But there was a lot of sort of physical changes as well. Obviously, they had to apply whatever was in the Taylor report. They had to and also trying to get back into Europe. I think England got back in on trial basis. I think, anyway. But all of that they were changes. And then, of course, finally getting over the line as number one, which has not happened for 27 years, I think it was. That was, and it's funny when obviously been talking about this a lot. There's a question that always been asked: the treble or the European Championship? What's the best? And I say it's like comparing apples and pears, but you have to bring the third one into it as well, which is equally as good and equally as important. It's the first Premier League win. The reason behind I'm saying that is everything changed, not the football club on its own. Everything changed when that game at Villa Park, where Oldham won, had finished. Everything changed. All of a sudden, we were not that team anymore that couldn't win. People looked at us differently. We were celebrated differently. All of a sudden, the atmosphere at Old Trafford changed. All of a sudden, we were the winning team. And no matter where you were, people looked at you as a winner. And people were happy, And I have to say, this is one of the reasons I really like Manchester so much. Yes, there is the, Man United, Man City thing that's always been there, but it's very, very good-hearted. And even the Man City people, I knew quite a lot of Man City people at the time. They were so happy, they were so happy that finally, and I think deep down, it goes the other way at the moment as well. Okay, we're a little bit jealous of how well they've done. And we're bound to be because there's an energy too. But I don't think we hate it. We hate it when Liverpool win. We don't hate it when Man City win. And all of that happened in that year. All that changed. And it was something that you felt straight away. And of course, with that comes responsibility. You have to go and do it again. Because if you can only win it and then not repeat it, then you're not really a true winner. That was the next sort of narrative from Ferguson. That was the next thing. That was fine. Absolutely fantastic. You've done well. Now we're going to win it again. Then once we won it, we can call ourselves winners. And then, of course, we did. And we then didn't do it in the third year, which is, I think, that is the most important season in my career at Manchester United. When we don't win, where Blackburn goes and win it, and we also lose the FA Cup final to Everton. Because from that, new things happened. New mentality, new players, new requirements. We stepped it up a little bit. So not only did we have to win the Premier League, now we also had to make a big, big move into Europe. And so we were talking 95 there. So that bit of work, it took about 4 years to fully do it. And of course we did it in incredible way, winning everything. But that was what it was like being at Man United. Always the next thing, always stepping up, absolutely using when it's not going your way, using everything you learn from that to bring it into winning.
Schmeichel's humble nature really struck me during our chat. So reticent to praise himself, and he really was awesome that season, and so generous in his praise of Sir Alex Ferguson and Eric Cantona. Most interesting, though, I thought, was Cantona's influence on the whole club and its young players, who would, of course, become a huge part of United's domination of the 90s. Paul Scholes was a starry-eyed youth player when he first met Cantona.
Oh, it was great for every young player. It was a great experience. Just the way he looked after himself, the way he prepared himself for games. It wasn't really something that us young players had seen. We were professional, don't get me wrong. We had coaches who demanded you were professional. But Eric just seemed different in that way. He was in the gym before training, he was in the gym after training, he was out practicing on the football pitch all the time. It was a great experience, a great learning curve for all of us. we'd have liked to play them a little bit longer. I think, me especially, I think I was only there maybe a year, 18 months before he decided to retire. But no, to have a man like that round, just for the manager's sake as well, to set an example to young players, he couldn't have been any better. He had this persona of being a cool guy, if you like, and he was very cool, and we all admired him. We all wanted to be like him. We all wanted to play like him, look like him, whatever it was. So yeah, it probably did get brushed over a little bit how much on the football side of it he brought to so many players at Man United. He was the missing link in the end, really, even to the first team, the established players, and then for us young players to be coming through. We were so lucky to come through at that time with such professional people, and Eric was a massive part of that.
Ferguson, just as much as Cantona, became the symbol of United and their owning of the decade. Harry Redknapp had the unenviable task of facing Ferguson in the opposition dugout.
Difficult, Charlie. When you went to Man United, they were just, the pace of the team. It was such a well-balanced team. Amazing, really. And if you went one down early on, you knew you were in for a very, very long, hard afternoon. They could really absolutely murder you. So it was difficult. You was always trying to find a solution. You'd think about the best way to go about trying to get there and get a positive result and stop Man United. But it was never easy because they came at you from so many different angles.
It was heartbreak that first season in the end for Chris Sutton and my team, Norwich City. But 30 years later, he's philosophical about the title challenge.
We had a big game against Manchester United under the lights where I do think had we won that game, then it's all if, buts and maybes now. But I do think little Norwich City could have gone on to win the Premier League. We didn't. And that really set us back. And I think they blew us away in the first half. Good United team. Schmeichel, Bruce, Pallister, Paul Ince played that night. Eric Cantona, Giggs was starting to emerge at that particular time. So no shame in losing to them. But the whole nature of that particular season, Norwich City favourites for relegation. I think we were, not winning in pre-season, but then somehow stumbling into form, and just shows you what confidence can do. And also a group of good players. Do I think that at the time we thought we were capable of winning the Premier League as the season was going on with the likes of United, the players they had at their disposal? I don't think we ever talked about it. I think we were just sort of on a ride, enjoying it, thinking maybe, what the hell's going on,
Sutton didn't have to wait too long to get his revenge, however. Blackburn bought him as part of their early 90s spending spree to try and topple United, which they did successfully in 1995, aided by their owner Jack Walker. We'll hear much more from Chris in Chapter 2, The House That Jack Built.
BT Sport Pods.